Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, that is right, my friends. Hour 2 of today's program, we're talking about who the media is trying to frame as an American hero who's not even American. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, this is the individual who has been in prison now in El Salvador. Clearly some missteps and problems here, but there's much more to this than meets the eye if you've simply been listening to the media. And so I want to talk about that. I spent last hour giving a lot of background, things that are relevant to this case, what's happening here. I tell you that I'm not a journalist. I'm not. I'm a guy with opinions. I come on here, I share with you my thoughts, very thoughtful and authentic way, very entertaining way as well. And listen, you can take them or leave them. Be well advised to take them, but you can take them or leave them. And generally, that's what we do. We talk about these things. Our mission is to help people hear and receive truth. I don't have all the answers. I understand why it's tempting to believe that we do, given the brilliance of this commentary. I'm kidding, but not really. I can understand why people think that, but I don't have all the answers. But I do know some things that are true. And I do know that when this nation turns from truth long enough, some really, really bad things can happen. By the way, this weekend, the greatest story of truth ever told culminates with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Tomorrow's Good Friday. Tonight's the night that it is believed that Jesus shared the Last Supper. That was the subject of the Todd Talk for today. The Last Supper, which of course was the Jewish Seder meal. Lots of things happening and going on here, my friends. But we're talking here today. I'm acting a little bit more like a reporter, at least I did last hour. This hour, I'm going to do a little bit more commentary. But my goodness, the things that they want you to believe about this guy, just to make sure, I guess, that we don't deport an individual who should be deported, who's connected, allegedly, according to reports, to a gang his wife had filed reports of abuse against that he had allegedly made against her. This is a guy that's got a lot of bad things about him, but they're acting as though this guy's an American hero. But this is what the left does. They find a personal story that people, don't like a particular outcome, and sometimes understandably and justifiably so, but then they make the individual a hero in the process, and those two things are not always connected. There can be multiple bad characters in a story. There doesn't have to be a hero and a villain, but I do know this: for the left, the villain is always Trump, the villain is always liberty, the villain is always America, and the hero is, people who are standing in direct opposition of those things. So I want to talk more about this today. I want to pick up where I left off at the top or at the end of last hour, which is AI that I used that was trying to lie to me about what the Supreme Court ruling was. And I want to clarify that as best I can in this hour of the program, because you need to know what the court actually said. And I'm going to go through, a little bit about how that AI tried to lie to me or whatever. Anyway, before I do that, though, let me remind you, if you like the content of this program, one of the best things you can do, you can write in, you can leave reviews on our podcast. Those things are great, and I welcome you to do that. You can sign up for our email newsletter. You can send me an email, share your thoughts, all that stuff. Totally welcome, and I love it, actually. You can also, the best thing you can do is support the advertisers that make this program possible. You listen to this program it's completely free, and I love it that it's free, but it costs to produce, and it's the advertisers make that possible. And so the advertisers that you hear sharing their brand, their message on this program, if you could support them, that would be a wonderful way to support this program and this movement. But you could also support people who have a listing on Freedom Marketplace. Now, I'm not asking you for charity. I'm just saying to be mindful of these things, because how many times have you given your money to a business who has taken that money, especially if it's a bigger business, corporate America, and they have funded causes that you fight against with all of your heart and soul on a regular basis? You don't have to worry about that when you shop with businesses on Freedom Marketplace. Freedom Marketplace is where you can go to find businesses that are pushing in the same direction you are. It's where you can find businesses that have pledged to not support woke candidates and woke causes. No login required, no strings attached, just good, patriotic businesses that are pushing in the same direction you are. Check it out today. It's totally free to you, freedommarketplace.net. Again, that's freedommarketplace.net. It is a wholly owned and operated here at the Todd Huff Show. We're growing it. We're developing it. Again, it's totally free, freedommarketplace.net. Liberty and business for all, my friends. At the end of last hour, I shared with you that I've shared this before, but last hour I said, look, I use AI for some things. Now, I use AI to help me clarify some thoughts and ideas, to proofread some things, or to summarize larger cases or larger issues, to do a little bit of research. But as I've said to you before, as I said last hour, you should not, and I should not, turn off the thinking part of my brain and just absorb whatever it is that AI tells me, because AI, it can sometimes be incorrect, and sometimes there's built-in biases. I'm telling you, because this has to be created by somebody. And look, I'll stand by the AI that we have. We have some really fantastic, we have a ton of different AI platforms that we use, and I use different ones for different things. And I am pleased with the quality of this AI. It's pretty remarkable, really. It helps me in a lot of ways. But I don't turn off the thinking part of my brain. I'm reminded back in high school, I had a teacher. His name was Mr. Shukla. And Mr. Shukla, I loved Mr. Shukla. He was from India. And he would, honestly, he was too smart for the rest of us. The guy, I think he taught chemistry, advanced math, trigonometry, calculus, physics. The guy was a genius. Sometimes we had difficult time learning from him, sometimes because of the language barrier, sometimes because of the cultural just differences of how he was raised. But for the most part, you could understand that the biggest problem was his, the vastness of space between what was in his mind and what was in our minds. Of course, this was in high school. I was a okay student, but I also had my fair amount of screwing around and having fun with my friends. And we would do that in his class. But I remember distinctly, one time we took a test in his class, and everybody bombed it. Everybody bombed it. He was very upset with us. And he basically yelled at us the whole class period, which candidly I would say we deserved. But I remember one part of this lecture screaming at us. He said, kids, you take the calculator, you enter in 2 plus 2, and it says 395, and you just write it down. And he's right. Now, that the profundity of that statement applied to today is, I think, pretty deep, because people Google something, and Google tells them something, or now with AI, you can ask AI to summarize something, and you don't think. If you don't think and you just think whatever it tells me is correct, man, you're asking for trouble. And so I asked this AI to summarize the Supreme Court decision, the ruling about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And that's my first prompt in here was, please provide an unbiased one-page summary of the Supreme Court ruling on Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And so I read to you the first sentence in the previous hour. I'll do it again since some of you may be joining us here. It said, this is the AI, which I use on a regular basis. It said the Supreme Court of the United States delivered a unanimous 9-0 ruling on April 10th, 2025 in the case concerning Kilmar Abrego Garcia, ordering the Trump administration to facilitate his return to the United States following what was determined to be a wrongful deportation. Now, it put out a lot of other stuff, but that caught my attention because I had read and I had seen some commentary, and this wasn't clear to me. Really, to me, the question was, did the court order him to be returned to America, or did the court rule that the United States should try to facilitate his release from prison in El Salvador? Those are not necessarily the same things, my friends. Just because you're released from an El Salvadoran prison doesn't mean that you are suddenly returned to the United States of America. And so that's what I asked it. I said, did the court order his return or his release from prison? And the AI said, based on the research reports provided, I can clearly I can clarify the Supreme Court's order. The primary directive has 2 points. Number 1, facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador. Second point was ensure his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. So again, I went back to the AI and I said, but you said the ruling required his return to the U.S. Is that true or not? It says, I apologize for the inconsistency in my previous responses. You are correct to point out this discrepancy, and I need to correct the record. This is AI, which is supposed to know everything, right? Some people treat this like it is basically like God. I'm not saying it doesn't know a lot. I'm not saying it doesn't have the information at its fingertips, but listen, this has to be programmed by somebody. This has to be pulling information from somewhere. It's oftentimes scanning stories that are written by people that are lying to us to begin with. So we just have to use caution here. And so here's what it says, clarification of the Supreme Court ruling. Initial error in reporting. In my first response, this is the AI, I incorrectly stated that the Supreme Court ordered, quote, the Trump administration to facilitate his return to the United States. This was inaccurate, and I apologize for this error. Okay, fact checkers all around out there. I hear the media. I've got a story here in the stack of stuff, which you can see on our website if you want to see it. I don't know if I'll get to it, but I've got it in there. But there's an example of a journalist yelling at a Republican representative in Congress, fighting with him, saying that this order was to facilitate his return to the United States. Now, what has admittedly made this confusing is that was the ruling of the lower court. The lower court. So if you, again, read through the ruling or look at the summary that I'm about to give you, which, again, this is much clearer and much cleaner. The Supreme Court's order stayed the April 4th order of the United States District Court for the District of Maryland. That was the order that said these things. The order that said facilitate, and what was the other word? It'll come to me, effectuate the return of Garcia to the United States. But the Supreme Court ruling simply stayed that order, and it focused on facilitating his release from custody in El Salvador. It did not specifically mandate his return to the United States. The district court had initially ordered the U.S. government to facilitate and effectuate Abrego Garcia's return to the U.S. The Supreme Court noted that the term effectuate in the district court's order needed clarification and might exceed the district court's authority. Well. Seems that there's a lot more to this, doesn't it? The situation remains complex, with Abrego Garcia still being detained in El Salvador's terrorism confinement center, El Salvador's government maintaining its position against release, ongoing diplomatic and political challenges between the U.S. and El Salvador. Then it told me it was sorry for the wrong information. I asked it why would you give me wrong information? Then it explained, it tried to give an explanation. didn't properly verify the source material, which is the problem, right? So what it's basically saying is, Todd, the reason I was wrong is because I summarized a bunch of articles, a bunch of opinions that was under the guise of journalism, half-truths that the media is posting out there saying that the Supreme Court ordered the return of this guy. They did not. They did not. In fact, they basically said that may not even be within the jurisdiction to effectuate the return of Garcia to the United States. Isn't that interesting? Here's the example. Remember I said I will reference this. This isn't a stack of stuff still. But this is thehill.com headline: CNN host, GOP lawmakers spar over Trump deportation standoff. This is written by Ashley Fields. Representative Rich McCormick, Republican of Georgia, sparred with CNN host Pamela Brown over the Supreme Court's ruling regarding the deportation of a Maryland man, there we go again, who was sent to the CECOT maximum security prison. That's the terrorism prison's name in El Salvador. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was removed from the U.S. last month, despite his legal residency in Maryland for more than a decade. Again, this article isn't even telling all the information, but let's get to, here it is. During their Wednesday interaction, Brown and McCormick, Brown's the host of the show, McCormick's the representative, they got into a heated discussion over the various orders. Brown said this: the Supreme Court did weigh in and say that it agreed with the district court judge saying that the U.S. administration, he interjected, McCormick did, and said, no, it did not. That's false reporting. You know that's false. Let me finish my sentence, Congressman, she continues. I understand you're trying to create a moment right now to try to get pickup, and that's self-serving. That's not serving our viewers. Well, that's the host of the show, CNN. I mean, come on, CNN. Anyway, she went on to say here, well, where's the rest of the statement here? Yeah, she says, no, what I'm laying out here is the facts. The Supreme Court, the forged page opinion, agreed with the lower court judge that it should, the administration said, quote unquote, facilitate his return. That's not what it says. It says that effectuate, making the administration bring him back, is not something the Supreme Court said that would even potentially, may not even be under the power of the district court. Go read it. I mean, I've looked at this. I've run summaries. I told you what the AI did. The AI originally told me that the Supreme Court said this, but now it's saying the administration should just facilitate his release. Now what's happening is the administration says, look, happy to do it, I guess, but we don't have any control over what El Salvador does. Stephen Miller said this the other day as well. We played some of these clips and sound bites. So here's what we've got today. We've got the administration's position is that this guy should have been deported. He's a violent member of MS-13. They've got the receipts to at least make that case. He's here illegally. No one's disputing that. If you're here illegally, you should be deported. I mean, that is the case. That there's really no denying that. Now, he's not supposed to be released to El Salvador, and he's released specifically to a prison. So now this is much more complicated. Now the administration's saying, look, we made an administrative error in deporting him to El Salvador, but we can't make El Salvador release him. And we don't control their laws. We can't. This is outside of our purview, our jurisdiction. And by the way, even if he does get released, he can't come back here. Pam Bondi talking to the media yesterday. I think this was yesterday. It could have been the day before. So she was talking about this guy, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, talking about what happened here. Here's what Pam Bondi says in no uncertain terms about his return.
He is not coming back to our country. President Bukele said he was not sending him back. That's the end of the story. If he wanted to send him back, we would give him a plane ride back. There was no situation ever where he was going to stay in this country. None. But he's from El Salvador, he's in El Salvador, and that's where the president plans on keeping him.
Okay, so that's what the administration is saying. So it's obviously much more complicated than simply, hey, we found a guy who's not, that we just want to kick out. He's a Maryland man, a Maryland father, just this peace-loving, average, run-of-the-mill American, quietly living his life here in the United States. We've already gone through this. He's got a history of alleged domestic violence. He's been identified as a member of the MS-13 gang. He's not a legal resident. He's not here legally in this country. He is here illegally. He has a deportation order. He does have a withholding order to not be deported to El Salvador, but he can be deported to another country at any moment, another country that would take him. But again, this is where we are. And the Trump administration says, got some problems here. Now, on top of all of that, and I've got to take a break here, getting to the end of the first segment. Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen flew to El Salvador to visit Garcia, and he was denied access to visit him. Talk about that on the other side of the break. Before we get to that break, my friends, I know you care about this country. I know you care about its future. We need you here for the long haul, my friends. Obviously your family needs you, your business, your church, your community, all those things. But we need you. We need you healthy. We need you engaged and staying in the fight. And part of that means you've got to take care of yourself. Listen, I didn't always do a great job of this myself. But as I've aged, I've realized, hey, I'm going to have to take some steps that I didn't take before. And one of those steps I've started doing is taking Solti, S-O-L-T-E-A. Solti is an all-natural supplement that's good for your heart. Science has demonstrated and proven that it can change for the better, that it can lower your cholesterol. May be able to do the same for you. So you can check it out, Solti.com, S-O-L-T-E-A. Use promo code TOD. You're going to save 50% off your first 3-month shipment supply of Solti, and you're going to get free shipping to boot. What do you have to lose besides high cholesterol numbers? Solti.com, S-O-L-T-E-A, promo code TOD gets you those discounts. I've got to take a break, my friends. Sit tight. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Here we go. Second segment of the second hour. Moving along quickly here as we're talking about Kilmar Abrego Garcia. When I left you last segment, I reminded you or told you that Senator Chris Van Hollen, a Democrat from the state of Maryland. Every time I think of Maryland, I got to say this really quickly because I think this was the all-time favorite nickname on this program. Back in 2016, you might recall, this program started, by the way, 2015, August 10th. I remember talking about the Democratic primary in 2016, Hillary Clinton. It was 4 old white guys and a Clinton. I remember this. I remember it was Bernie Sanders. Boy, who else was it? One of them was this guy that I want to tell you about. I'm drawing a blank on the others. So I said the Democrat Party, who's been preaching to us about ethnic and racial diversity, has given us 4 old white guys and a Clinton, and one of those I affectionately referred to as sexy Martin O'Malley. That was, I think, the all-time favorite nickname we've used on this program from you. I think you liked that one the most. I heard that a lot. People seem to enjoy sexy Martin O'Malley. And the reason I called him that, for those of you who want a quick history lesson, Martin O'Malley, and this is why I thought of him, thinking about Chris Van Hollen here from Maryland. Martin O'Malley was the former governor of the state of Maryland, and he was down at like 1% in the polls. And so he decided to go shirtless on a beach in Maryland, and this got him a temporary bump. He doubled his support. He went up to like 2%, maybe even 3%. And it was all because he was shirtless on the beach, and a lot of folks liked that. They liked seeing Martin O'Malley shirtless. So I started calling him sexy, sexy, sexy Martin O'Malley, and you got to put the right emphasis on the last sexy there. But I did that, again, not to mock him so much as to mock the stupidity of how suddenly someone can double or triple their popularity in the Democrat Party simply by taking off their shirt on the beach in Maryland. Crazy stuff. Anyway, Chris Van Hollen is from that same state. I'm sure he knows Martin O'Malley, sexy, sexy, sexy Martin O'Malley very well. So he gets on a jet, flies down to El Salvador. Fox News here reports Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat from Maryland, was denied a visit with a Salvadoran migrant and accused MS-13 member who was deported to El Salvador after flying to the country on Wednesday morning. Van Hollen intended to visit Kilmar Abrego Garcia, 29, who was deported to the El Salvadoran Mega Prison Terrorism Confinement Center, that's the CECOT, for being an alleged MS-13 gang member, though his attorneys maintain he does not have any gang ties. Listen, we didn't convict him of any of those things here. We deported him. We deported him because law enforcement said he had ties, but he had a deportation order anyway. Now, again, as I've gone through extensively here, to be completely fair, there was an order, a withholding order from a judge that said he could not be deported to El Salvador, but here we go. Here we are, right? And so Van Hollen, Democrat that he is, flies down there looking for a photo op, a press conference opportunity. He spoke to reporters, the article says here, from El Salvador on Wednesday afternoon, where he vowed to continue pressing for access to Abrego Garcia. He also met with the vice president because the president was out of the country. You might recall Bukele had met with Trump. Was it last week, I guess, or maybe early this week? Though Van Hollen said he was grateful to speak about the case of Abrego Garcia. I asked the vice president if I could meet with Mr. Abrego Garcia, and he said, well, you need to make earlier provisions to go visit CECOT. He said he was not able to make that happen. All right, so there you go. So now you got this story. Now it's got a senator from Maryland flying down there, a guy who's in Maryland who shouldn't even be in Maryland, with Abrego Garcia. He's an illegal alien with a deportation order. Chris Van Hollen, who would, I guess, suggest or say he's the Senate representative of Mr. Abrego Garcia, but that's not accurate either. Abrego Garcia better not. Is Abrego Garcia voting at elections? Did Abrego Garcia cast a ballot for the Democrat Chris Van Hollen? Is that what happened? He doesn't represent him. We are in crazy, crazy times. Absolutely insane, crazy times. So that's another element, or I guess part of this story. On top of that, we got Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi is all over this. She said here, is this a, I don't know if she said this in a statement. I just have it written. So it could have been during an interview or a statement. She said these people talking about the Democrats, these people are so detached from reality that they don't care about the victims of crimes in this country. There is no reason that there is a reason that Donald Trump declared MS-13 as a foreign terrorist organization, because they have come to our country. They are highly organized. They are murdering people. They are raping people. They are organized at crime at its worst. She reiterated her support for President Trump's decision to classify MS-13 as a foreign terrorist group, arguing it reflects the scale of the gang's criminal activity in the United States. They are spread rampant throughout the country, and we are going to rid our country of MS-13 and TDA Tren de Aragua. We're just thankful President Bukele will take them in to a prison in El Salvador. That's what she said. I guess she was on with Jesse Waters, I'm sorry. So, this has just exploded. Now, you know that I like, looking at the time here, you know that I like Scott Jennings. Scott Jennings, he's a glutton for punishment here. He goes on to CNN on the regular. But he's on CNN. He's on CNN talking about this very thing. He's talking specifically with a liberal, Julie Roginski. And he's just basically saying everything you're saying about this is incorrect. So this is, I guess, a snapshot of how the left is framing this argument, how they're talking about it. And again, Scott Jennings is simply trying to say that's not really what's going on here. I just want you to listen to this. It's kind of a microcosm, kind of what we talked about here on the program today. But that being said, here is CNN, starting here with Julie Roginski, and then you will hear Scott Jennings come in and question some of her assertions, a little bit of back and forth, but it gives you an idea about what the left is saying about this particular
If this
issue.
president and this administration can accuse somebody of being a terrorist, then accuse any one of us of being a terrorist and do with us what they will. There's due process that exists in this country for everybody. And the fact that this man received no due process, he was effectively disappeared to a foreign country, a country which he came from, which he was basically got
It's not a foreign country. He lives there.
Excuse me, no, he does not live there.
He's a citizen of El Salvador.
Scott, excuse me, he got asylum in this country.
He's a citizen.
Scott,
does he have asylum?
Excuse me, let me finish.
No, he doesn't.
No, it's not that he. Sorry, it's not that he got asylum. He got a judge to say that he could not be.
Does he have a deportation order?
Excuse me,
Yes.
he could not be. Can you let me finish? He could not be rendered back to El Salvador because he was at risk of being harmed in El Salvador. That is what a federal judge. That is what a federal judge.
By who? Who was he at risk of?
Excuse me. That was what a federal judge said.
He could not be deported. Risk of being harmed by? I'm asking you.
Who could he be at risk by? I don't know.
A rival gang.
No. Excuse me, Scott. Excuse me. Stop. Do you really believe that this guy's an MS-13 member? Because
I've got two heads of state telling me that they believe it.
Oh, okay. Your heads of state. Okay. Barack Obama said that.
Okay. She's upset. Now, listen, again, it's conflating the issue in a lot of ways here. I've gone through this, and I don't have a lot of time here. But this issue of due process, you can be charged with being a member of a gang, but you would go through due process rights. You would, as an American citizen charged with maybe a crime from being associated with this gang, you would go through the process where you would be, entitled to legal representation. You would be able to see the evidence against you. You would be able to mount a defense. You wouldn't have to testify against yourself. All the typical legal standards are in place. This guy wasn't put in prison here. What El Salvador does with him, we can't do anything about that. That's El Salvador. Now, the guy, he should have been sent somewhere else. But listen, we did not imprison this guy for being a member of MS-13. We used his connections to MS-13 to simply say, you're at the front of the line, you're a violent guy, you're involved in things you shouldn't be involved with. You've got a deportation order anyway, so that's why you're being deported. She's conflating these things as usual. I have to take a break, my friends. Quick time out. Back in a minute. Welcome back, my friends. I can answer those questions that Scott Jennings asked. Does he have a deportation order? Yes, he did. Could an American citizen be deported to El Salvador and put into a prison with other terrorists and gang members? No, that's not how that works. Who is he afraid of? Who is he fearful of in El Salvador? Well, he is fearful of other gang members, rival gang members. She acts as though Julie Rodzinski there, she acts as though she has no idea that that's the problem. They don't want to get into specifics. They want to talk about these platitudes because it sounds, if you say a Maryland man was sent to a terrorist prison in El Salvador by the Trump administration, that sounds like it's the modern day gulags. But when you have, we've gone 2 hours here today, going through the minutia of this, talking about all of the stuff that goes along with this, and there's obviously much more to this. Context is king, my friends. Context is king. And so they don't want to admit the obvious, that he is an illegal alien, that he did have a deportation order, that he has people who study and who are involved with dealing with gangs in law enforcement agencies in this country. And those folks say he's connected to, a member of, this gang. Even if he wasn't, he could still be deported because he's here illegally. Look, I admit this situation of him being sent to El Salvador, that creates a problem that could have been avoided. But none of this means that he should simply be flown back to the United States and allowed to live here. He's an alleged abuser of his spouse. The allegations made by his now wife, who says that these things were just disagreements. So was she lying on the original paperwork? Is she lying now? Because it didn't sound like a disagreement from what I read to you earlier about the allegations she made against this American hero, Mr. Abrego Garcia. What are the Democrats doing here? That's really what I want to talk about here in the final minutes of this program. And I don't have many, but what are they doing here? Listen, I am fine with them asking questions and pointing out that, you know what, this guy shouldn't be in El Salvador. But all this other stuff, defending this guy, his behavior, acting as though we didn't have the right to deport him, acting as though they don't know why he's connected to the MS-13 gangs and so forth. They do. They do know that. What are they doing to their party? They are going to destroy, and I'm okay with it politically, because I don't think today's Democrat Party, someone who's running as a Democrat, should be let within 5 miles of any government building. That's hyperbole, by the way. As a free citizen, they should be able to go. I just don't think they should be on the side that's making the laws, interpreting the laws, and that sort of thing. I think they should be on the civilian side of that. I think they should sit this one out, as folks say. Participate in a free society, but don't give these folks any governing authority, because it's a nightmare to deal with this. It's an absolute nightmare. And they're showing their true colors. They praise the villains and they criticize the good guys. This is a complicated case. I get that. We didn't violate his due process rights. He's been given an order of deportation since 2019. We made a mistake by sending him to El Salvador. But again, he was ruled to be eligible for deportation since 2019. As I stated earlier, they're on the wrong side of this. Specifically in this case, there are problems. I admit it. I have no problem saying that. But he's not an American hero. He's not some upstanding moral person who's just been targeted by the government. That is not what has happened here. That is not what happened here. Americans are tired of these games being played against them. Americans are we have profound amounts of goodwill in this. We're far from perfect, but this is a country that routinely welcomes immigrants, legal immigrants, by the way, folks who are permanent residents of this country who aren't necessarily citizens. And I got an email about that yesterday. I wish I had more time to elaborate on that. But not every person, hear me say this, not every person who is here and not a citizen is an illegal alien. There's different classifications for people and all of that, but there are plenty of people who have broken our laws, and the American people, the American taxpayer has had enough. The American taxpayer has had enough of the games and the shenanigans. The American taxpayer has had enough of the previous administration doing everything in its power to not deport anybody, to not enforce the security along our southern border, to not do anything other than the bare minimum, and even at times kicking and screaming when they were expected to do even that. The American people are tired of this. This has real profound effects on families, on our safety. My goodness, these are people who are gang members, who are violent and evil. These are terrible people doing terrible things, my friends. The American people have had enough. Democrats are committing an egregious mistake here by supporting this politically. I'm out of time, though. Gotta go. SDG.